So Sasha LaPointe from the Upper Skagit and Nooksack Indian tribe. Native to the Pacific Northwest, she draws inspiration from her coastal heritage as well as her life in the city. She writes with a focus on trauma and resilience, ranging topics from PTSD, sexual violence, the work her great-grandmother did for the Lushootseed language revitalization, to loud basement punk shows and what it means to grow up mixed heritage. With strange obsessions revolving around Twin Peaks, the Seattle music scene, and Coast Salish shaman ceremonies, Sasha explores her own truth of Indigenous identity in the Coast Salish territory. Please welcome Sasha LaPointe.
Twal gulapu gulapu de ished, es chalchuv, CEAB, CIAA, Takshablu, Seedsta, Twal, Nooksack, Gwal, Skagit. Hello, welcome everybody. It's an honor to be here with you all. My name is Sasha LaPointe, and I'm from Nooksack and Upper Skagit. And I just raise my hands in thanks to the wonderful folks here for having me. And yeah, it's such a powerful and beautiful thing to be kicking off something as important as, Indigenous and Native Heritage Month. I'm very, very honored, so thank you. I wanted to start today, and this is something I do whether I'm at a reading or, at a speaking event. I like to open the space with other voices. I like to open up sharing my dear friends' work. So it's something I try to do all the time, and I love it when other poets and writers do this and just invite other voices into the room because, we're a community, we're a collective, and I just like to make space with that. And thinking of the theme of why I'm speaking here today and celebrating our Indigenous heritage, I selected a couple poems to get us started. And then I will talk about other things and read some of my own work. The first one I want to read is from an amazing, wonderful professor I had at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I went there for both my undergrad and my MFA. And she's an incredible professor and friend and poet. And I wanted to share this one because where I am currently teaching at the Native Pathways program in Evergreen, our theme this quarter is Indigenous Futurisms. So we're talking a lot about the future of our world. And this poem I shared with my students a couple weeks ago, and it really resonated with them. And they had some powerful feedback and free writes in response to it. And it just felt like the vibe. So I'll start with this one. It's called The Swimmers. After all the wolves on the island were killed by cyanide, traps, and bullets, decades later, wolves from the mainland swam for miles to repopulate the island. By dream, by twitch, by lope, by gazing from the shore, by howls that gather, by circle and whine, by hint, rumor and surge, by yearn, nip and bark, by stretch, itch and shake, by splash, dunk and swim by starlight, by bull kelp and driftwood, by calm and gelatinous sea, by stink of whale, by salt of far, by winter fur, by paws as paddles, by chuff and nostril huff, by steam of breath above the sea, by belly of salmon, by hunger for deer, by memory in blood, by roam for love, by milk and teat, by marrow and fat, by muscle, skull, and golden eyes, by magnetic pole, by currents and tides, by miles, by sinking cold, with no one watching, by sea, by sea, by sea. And I wanted to share that one. This former professor and good friend every summer would make this trek all the way from the Institute of American Indian Arts is in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she would drive each summer to Quartz Island, which is up north, closer to where I'm from. I grew up in Swinomish, close to the San Juans, right? And she would make this drive and every summer go stay and study sea wolves. And I thought this poem was so powerful, especially thinking about celebrating, our Native Heritage Month, because these wolves, which were almost, erased from their island, somehow made it back. And it was really cool to share that with my students and to see what responses they had to like this sort of survival, and not just surviving, but thriving. So I wanted to open us with her words. And second is my dear friend, Tay Tibble, who is visiting, as it turns out, from Aotearoa. She's Maori from New Zealand. And she's one of my favorite poets of all time and happens to be one of my good friends. And with this idea of really being visible and making ourselves, not just surviving, but thriving, I wanted to share a short section from her prose poem. It's kind of lyric essay prose poem called Pocahontas, an essay about Indigenous hair do's and don'ts. And it's really beautiful, but I'll just read a short excerpt. Pocahontas. In 1995, I was born and Walt Disney's animated classic, Pocahontas, was released. Have you ever heard a wolf cry to the blue corn moon? Mom has. I howled when my mother told me Pocahontas was real, but went with John Smith to England and got a disease and died. Representation is important. And I wanted to open with that one. Like the Wolves poem, I think it's really, really powerful and speaks to our visibility. And she has this recurring line throughout this collection, which I'm also going to be a bit of a cheerleader for my friend's book, Tay Tibble, Pocahontas. It's so powerful from start to finish. I was actually such a nerd when this book was first sent to me. I was on a camping trip with some friends, none of which were writers or poets, but each night around the fire, I'd be like, I'm going to read aloud from this book. And they were like, oh my gosh, hanging out with poets is so annoying. But on that camp trip, I read the whole thing start to finish, and it just really had a huge impact on me. So if you're interested in badass Indigenous poetry, please check out her work. And I'll say this too at the end. I'm going to close with a final poem from this book, Ask the Brindled, by No'u Revila. She's an incredible queer Hawaiian poet and educator and activist, and really, really cool. So I like to sort of open with other Indigenous words and close with other Indigenous words, just to invite some more homies in the room. And we have some really great questions that I've looked over, so I'm excited to participate in the Q&A after I kind of ramble at you guys and read a little bit from Thunder Song. But it feels really powerful to be standing on a stage at a college right now. Speaking of, like both those poems I share with my students with the hopes of sort of evoking a pride in our sense of identity, right? As Indigenous people, as students, as writers, as creatives. It's not something that was always easy for me. My journey into academia was a bit of a roller coaster, and I kind of love admitting this. But as a teenager, I was a high school dropout of an alternative high school. Like, who does that, right? And I didn't feel like academic spaces were spaces for me. And I think that through, I feel really privileged too, I guess I should say, I'm a Gemini. We kind of dip, bob and weave. So hopefully you're staying with me here. But I think that thinking of Native Heritage Month and my own journey into academia and why I'm even standing on a stage right now has everything to do with the influence of my Coast Salish culture, And like it is a privilege to remain connected to that, and I absolutely want to honor that, and I always try to be accountable for that, because some of us are removed from our languages, our cultures. And so I feel very lucky, very blessed the way I grew up with my family, like my mom, my grandma, my great grandma, aunties, uncles, carvers, language revitalization activists, storytellers. That's such a gift to grow up that way. And I think without the influence of those values, those Coast Salish teachings, I'm not sure I would have made it or felt like academia was a place that I belonged. And it really was, I owe a lot to my great grandmother, the original Takshablu, whose name I carry, because ever since I was a really little kid, she was like, you're gonna do important things because you have to, which was terrifying as a kid to hear. But I'm so grateful for it. And so, being a teenager, being kind of a homeless, like runaway for a bit, I had some dark years, dropping out of alternative high school. I didn't think I would ever go back. I literally wanted to run away and join the circus. I'm not kidding. I wanted to be in punk bands and do performance art. And before she passed away, my grandmother sent me this pamphlet for the Institute of American Indian Arts. And I was at this crossroads of like, actually going to run away and join the circus. Someday I'll write about it. I haven't yet, but I was traveling with a band and burlesque performers, circus performers, and I came to this crossroads where she had sent me this pamphlet being like, you need to pursue this, like, think about it. And I was like, well, I dropped out of alternative high school. I don't like classrooms and academic spaces I haven't always felt comfortable in. So how can I do this? And when she passed, I found that pamphlet in my apartment and was like, I have to do this. I told the band, I told the circus performers, I'm not doing that. I'm actually going to pack up a U-Haul and move to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I had never been. And I'm a little coastal baby, so going to the high desert was intense for me. Being landlocked was intense for me. But I knew that her belief in me and those teachings of like, we have to, act accordingly and live up to our potential when Creator gives us an assignment. And her assignment for me was, you're a storyteller, not in the same way I am, but you're a storyteller in your own contemporary way. And so through her guidance and this sort of scary assignment she gave me, I was like, all right, I'm going to pack up and move to Santa Fe. And I thought that I would only go, and I know we'll have, I can go more in depth in this in the Q&A, because a couple questions touch on this, which I'm excited to chat more about. But when I first moved there, I was like, I'm just going to go for 1 quarter or like 1 semester or 2 semesters. And I'm going to take like painting classes and maybe some poetry classes. And then in my sophomore year, all of a sudden it hit me, and I remember calling home, calling my family and my partner and being like, I'm actually going to stay for the whole 4 years. And that surprised the hell out of my family. Like, they were like, wait, what? I thought you were just going to go like do some art classes. And I ended up making this huge life change. And it was the first time I had been in community with other Indigenous students, artists, filmmakers, writers, playwrights, and I really thrived in that. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel like when I was in high school. I also had tried to take classes at a community college where I was in a mostly white space, and I was like, this isn't for me. And when I arrived at the Institute of American Indian Arts and I was in classroom where I could feel safe and feel like myself and not have to explain things, like, it was so inspiring. And then I blew my own mind because I was like, I'm actually good at being a student, like, was on the honor roll, the dean's list, and my whole family was stunned, right? Like, they were like, you were the bad kid. But I got really good grades and felt so committed to it. And I think that that also speaks to our, like, we're celebrating Native Heritage Month. Being in that community was what I needed. And I hope that for the students where I work at Native Pathways program, I hope that for students in any institution that they find community, because I didn't realize what a huge difference that made. And so in a lot of ways, like I really am, I'm emotional and honored to be here, because in a lot of ways, thinking about our like Coast Salish heritage, it is what saved me. Like going through some dark times in my life, going through writing a memoir, a first failed memoir that failed epically. I thought that I had written this amazing thing in my grad program and people were interested in it. And it was like 460 pages of like, I'm just going to put this all out. But I needed to do that and like to come through and learn from my failure. And then, took a big break from writing and really dove into researching my lineage, the women who come before me, and I sort of let them be this guiding beacon for me. And I was doing a lot of spiritual healing. I was doing a lot, like took this break from writing and really just turned inward and reflected on myself, my mental health, my spirit, what was going on there. And, out of that came Red Paint, which actually did get published. And I would not be standing here had it not been the guidance from and the pride and the safety and the strength that I feel in my Coast Salish identity. So I kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. Like a lot of ways it truly did save me. And I'm so grateful. And so when we have things like Native Heritage Month and, Indigenous Peoples Day, it's no small thing to me because I think in a lot of ways, and I see this with my nieces and nephew who are young, but they get to go to cultural events now. They get to learn their language, and I see them light up with it. And I see that same strength that, like, for a long time growing up, I didn't have. And so it's a really special and just a massive thing to, like, call attention to celebrating our Indigenous identity, for thinking about our kids and our youth, like having that connection so it can guide them in whatever path that they want. I think it's so, so powerful. I want to read a little bit, like speaking of that, like, again, I can't reiterate enough that without the values and the sort of guidance from my family and elders in my community, my great-grandmother specifically, I wouldn't have a book, let alone 3. I wouldn't be standing here with the honor of sharing my story and my words with you without that. And when my most recent book, Thundersong, a collection of essays, came out, I was trying to kind of honor those cultural teachings, the things that have been passed down to us through traditional ways, through story, through language. Thundersong was kind of my homage to not only my great-grandmother, but our whole culture, our family. So I wanted to share a bit from the essay that I wrote for her specifically. And then we can do some questions. In 2006, I watched my great-grandmother address a sold-out crowd at Seattle's Benaroya Hall. She climbed the wooden steps of the stage, her small frame draped in her wool shawl, and I watched as her father's painted drum was handed to a percussionist in the orchestra. My great-grandmother, my namesake, turned and addressed the audience. She spoke about the first people of this land. She talked about a need for healing. People, she said, her heart breaking for a wounded world, have lost their way. Her father's drum sounded. The first powerful beat reverberated like thunder. 14 years later, my mom sits at her desk, a mosaic of script pages laid out around her. She's studying the opening scenes, the interviews, and the movements of the music. She's finalizing what will become the documentary of my great-grandmother's symphony. She looks up from her tiles and tells me, this must happen now. People need to hear this music again. The footage for the documentary has sat unused, dormant for all these years, until now. That spring, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, police officers murdered George Floyd in the streets of Minneapolis. Protests erupted around the country, and cop cars burned in the streets of Seattle. My great-grandmother was 83 years old when she commissioned the healing heart of the first people of this land. She had been troubled by the world. Back then, in 2001, the news was all about George W. Bush's war on terror. She saw beyond the fear. She saw a country divided, the wars across the ocean, and the violent injustices in her own streets. She saw that the people had lost their way. She believed so deeply in our people's stories, the teachings inherent within them. She knew that no one would listen to an old Indian woman, that she would have to reach them another way. Somehow, she arrived at what she called highbrow music, symphonies. This came to a shock to us. My great-grandmother hadn't grown up with this kind of stuff. She loved square dancing and Elvis. But she believed this was the way, that if all people could experience our beliefs through song, the music could heal the wound. She needed something that everyone could hear. She called a famous composer. "I need you to write a symphony," she demanded, "and to perform it at Royal Hall." The composer turned her down. But weeks after the call, he couldn't get this 83-year-old Indian woman's voice out of his head. He called her back, and together they collaborated on a symphony, the first to be based on Coast Salish spirit songs, with lyrics in Lushootseed, the traditional language. In our longhouse ceremonies, songs hold a spiritual power. There are certain songs for prayer, for healing. My great-grandmother had a cassette tape with recordings of 2 spirit songs. One belonged to a beloved cousin, and the other was Chief Seattle's Thunder Spirit song. She entrusted the tape to the composer with instructions to listen to but not share them. She wanted the songs to guide him as he wrote the symphony. She hoped that the healing power of these spirit songs would take shape in the symphony, and that when people heard it, they might be touched by that power. She was hoping for medicine, for a world that could change. On a hot summer day in 2020, I stood thronged in protest, in collective grief and anger. We yelled, we chanted, we demanded justice. I raised my cardboard sign that read in bold letters, "Indigenous solidarity with Black Lives Matter." But it didn't feel like enough, would never feel like enough. Weeks went by, weeks of flashbangs and tear gas, weeks of protesters being arrested and assaulted, until finally the people took over the precinct. With the police gone, the organizers secured 6 Seattle city blocks, declaring it the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. There were medical tents and tables of free books on political education. People brought crates of food to share while others held demonstrations. My partner and I walked the streets of a free Seattle, watching films being projected onto buildings, seeing murals painted over boarded-up windows. There were large plastic bottles of hand sanitizer duct taped to telephone poles. It seemed as though the people had created a utopia, until it didn't. We turned a corner to find the park in the center of the autonomous zone in full-blown festival mode. Kids in droves wielded glow sticks. It looked like Coachella. It looked like Burning Man. People were drunk, waving selfie sticks instead of placards, wearing angel wings and carrying hula hoops. Is this what change looked like? But in the middle of the intersection, we found a gathering of Coast Salish people. I watched as men laid out large cedar boughs in a circle. Then women entered carrying burning bundles. The cedar smoke wafted over the crowd, the tents, the abandoned precinct. They were sharing their medicine. When the first speaker approached, he asked that any and all Coast Salish and Indigenous people come forward to the edge of the circle. He asked that the white people step back for us. I looked at my partner, who looked at me, then gently let go of my hand. A young woman stepped away from her girlfriend, and together we both stepped forward, away from our white partners. Before we begin here today, the man with the mic yelled, "I want to honor our elder, Vi Takshablu Hilbert. It's important we remember her here on her land for the work she did for the Coast Salish people." The man spoke in Lushootseed and in English. He introduced a group of Coast Salish singers. They made a half moon around the burning cedar and hit their drums hard. I closed my eyes and saw my great-grandmother as she stood on stage at Royal Hall 14 years earlier. I saw the painted drum, heard its heartbeat as it boomed like thunder, as it called out for change. I hadn't heard my great-grandmother's name, her Skagit name, the name we shared, spoken in a very long time. The symphony had been her last project. She passed away before the documentary could be made, but right up until the end, she went to gatherings, to speaking events like this. I had seen her small and frail, but still so powerful when she spoke. I thought of her here today in this crowd and shuddered at the imagined worry. Even amid the threat of this pandemic, she would have been here. I let the drums wash over me as I cried, transporting me to the smoke-filled longhouse, my great-grandmother's hand on my shoulder as we listened. Throughout this pandemic, I returned to the books my great-grandmother made, the ones that house our language and our stories. Some days I spend crying, curled in the crook of my partner's lap as the cats and dog wander the house, charged with an animal anxiety. Some days I make salmon and black coffee, simply to fill the house with the familiar aroma of my great-grandmother's kitchen. All of these white women on Pinterest are baking loaves of sourdough, and I am trying to time travel. We climb out onto the roof of my house and watch the sky change. The world has stopped, but it feels even more frozen on the reservation. I have good days and bad days. We make a game out of our once-a-month grocery shopping. We call it the Hunger Games. We call it the soft apocalypse as we wait in line outside the Trader Joe's, masks on and 6 feet apart from anyone but each other. We dress up at night, light out all the candles in the house, eat the fanciest meal we can muster, and drink wine like expats in Paris. We spend the summer locked inside, only able to be outdoors for 15 minutes at a time. Beyond that, it's too dangerous, as the smoke from the wildfires ignites my asthma. I boil pots of cedar and rosemary to help me breathe, and still people are dying in record numbers. We are losing our elders, and I try to find my breath. I look for a mountain I can no longer see, its peak enveloped in smoke. A thick blanket of haze conceals the islands I know are out there, dotting the waters beyond the shore. On election night, my partner and I sit barefoot on the floor, nervously checking our phones. We scroll, we put them down, then anxiously pick them up again. We do this until I can't take it anymore. How is this even an option? I hold up my screen showing the very close count. I am afraid as a Coast Salish woman, a female-bodied person, a queer person. I am afraid for the people still being murdered by police, for the elders still threatened by the pandemic. I am afraid for how many times I might have to endure another aggression from a person who refuses to wear a mask but still clings to their MAGA hat like it was a prayer. Would I feel safe again? Would the world feel safe again? My partner picks up his guitar and strums the opening chords of one of my favorite Ramones songs. I join in off-key and giggling. By the time we reach the chorus, we are hysterical, barely able to get the lines out. We make it through the song only to roar with laughter and begin again. There is a power in the repetition. We let the song transport us. In her own home on election night, my mom is not scrolling the news. She is pressing play, pause, and rewind, busy transcribing interviews, busy sorting through the raw footage of that day at Benaroya Hall. Again and again, her grandmother illuminates the screen, paused in smile, in speech. Occasionally, the music floats through, the symphony inspired by a Coast Salish spirit song. In the interviews, my great-grandmother talks about her anxiety for the world, her rising concern, but there is something confident in her smile, some glimmer of hope when she speaks about the power of song. People have lost their way, she says. They need to be reminded to take care of one another. There is a belief in my Coast Salish culture that songs have the power to heal, that they can be medicine. My great-grandmother wanted to share that knowledge. She wanted to remind people to have compassion. She wanted to change things. I don't know anything about symphonies or orchestras. I don't know any spirit songs. But as we sing out loud until 2 a.m. on election night, we are no longer checking our phones. We are not thinking about the president or the pandemic. We are laughing, lost in the music, lost in trying to get it right, lost in a brief moment of hope. We are singing, we are dancing, we are trying to heal. And I wanted to share that, especially now. I think that I go to that essay a lot in my head and heart right now for what we are collectively moving through in the world. And again, this idea of celebrating Native Heritage Month, like what does that mean if not to actually consider our values and how and our teachings, our traditions, and how maybe, like, you know, this book was like a gift to my great-grandmother's spirit. It was a way to honor her and to try to pass along anything that she might have taught me, because I think it is truly important to share Indigenous knowledge and values and philosophies with the world, especially right now. And so I think that's why I feel very honored to be here and to have a platform to like try and remind myself that we do have the power to heal, the knowledge of healing, how to be better to one another, how to be better to ourselves. And that's kind of what I wanted to share with you all today. I want to leave us time for Q&A and also close with No'u Ravila's beautiful poem. And then we'll have questions and a conversation. Thank you so much for listening. So again, the theme of these poems from other folks that I'm sharing really is rooted in pride for who we are as Indigenous people, pride in our identities and our cultures, because I think that that's what this month should be about, right? I want, you know, my little nieces and nephew, I want my cousins, I want my students at the program I work at to like feel a massive sense of pride in who they are right now. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and read No'u Ravila's amazing poem. And I know you probably can't see it, but it looks really beautiful on the page. And that's kind of part of it. It's really important. It starts really small and then gets larger and larger across the page. And I'm a sucker for text and image. I'm like, oh, so I get really excited about nerdy things like this. But so this is by No'u Ravila, So Sacred, So Queer, after Leanne Simpson, after Billy Ray Belcourt. So sacred, so queer. So queer, my afterbirth planted. So sacred, I learned to grope for her in dirt, our fingernails before and after. So queer, I learned to bury origin stories that do not want me. In her hands, I learn return is so sacred. So sacred, a ceremony. When she plants my fingers in dirt, she makes us feel like creation. So queer, fingering creation, ma'i kapo, ma'i burials, protect dirt from shame. We keep the water coming, so sacred, so queer, so sacred. Thank you. All of my things.
Mic's over.
Hello.
Hello? Okay, there we go. Hello? Perfect. Thank you, everyone. One more round of applause, please. I'm just so grateful for all of these just baskets of medicine and affirmation, and especially listening to the language woven within English as well has been really, really beautiful today. So thank you for that. So we pulled together a couple questions to ask to just dive deeper into what's being shared and getting to know you a little bit more as well, outside of your amazing writing, but also you as a person and an artist and a scholar, and wanting to share more and hear more from that. And so our first question that I wanted to ask you is, did you enjoy writing when you were younger or when you were in school? What made you decide to do this as a profession? But also I want to say, what made you decide that this would be your medicine?
I love this question. I love all these questions, actually, like kudos. And this one, I like to joke, I go a little dark, but I think sometimes darkness is important to find balance and light. I have two small answers. One, as a little kid, I think I definitely just knew I loved writing. I also was like obsessed with my grandmas and the storytelling. Like I would just sit there like in awe of them. So I think, and then got into books really early, like just like I think had this huge appreciation and gratitude for stories of all forms from a very young age. And my dad actually roasted me at a reading. It was cute. I was like, oh, he got up during the Q&A and he was like, we knew she was going to be a writer because she'd leave these notes around the house. And like, just like little kid notes, like asking or saying I was going to the mall or that we were out of something. And he was like, but when she would write them, it would be like this novel. And he was like, we knew she'd be a writer just from like the notes she would put on her door or leave for us. And I was like, that's really sweet. I got all emotional in front of everybody. But there's another moment that was had a like profound impact on me when I was about 13 or 14 and started running away from home a lot. You know, I grew up on the Swinomish Reservation and I was kind of a bad kid. Just keeping it real here. I started running away and for some reason Seattle was always the thing. So I would hitchhike from up north to try and get down here. I would, you know, save up quarters to get a Greyhound bus ticket. It was a dangerous time for young Sasha. But one of the first trips I made to Seattle, I was sitting on a Greyhound bus and in, I think it was 8th or 9th grade, we had just learned about Sylvia Plath. Of course, I know I'm so predictable. I was like, I love Sylvia Plath. You know, blew my little 14-year-old goth mind apart in a good way. But I was sitting on this Greyhound bus thinking about poetry and being introduced to Sylvia Plath. And at the time, I didn't realize what I was having was a panic attack. And of course I was. I was a child and I was on a bus going to a city where I didn't know anybody. And so I felt my body just get really tense. And now I recognize it for what it was, a panic attack. But I was freaking out and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And I dug through my whole bag. I didn't have a notebook or any paper. And I found this napkin. And I wrote poems on every side, or like, you know, just started free writing on every like inch of this napkin. And it was what soothed me. It literally brought me back into my body. And this act of, you know, putting words down, I realized was the thing that was going to save me and to sort of stabilize and ground me. And it's been the thing ever since. And so, yeah.
Thank you. I say that because I write as well, but it took me many times of just having to get into a flow of being able to really be a vessel for that. So thank you very much. That's really great. The next question is, how does being a part of the punk community and being a part of the Native community intersect in your perspectives when you write?
See, these questions are fire. I love it. A couple years ago, the first time I really had to consider this, because in Thunder Song, there's even an essay that touches on the struggles I had with these two different facets of my identity that were so important, right? Like I fell in love with punk really young, like having, sitting in the trailer bathroom, making these mixtapes and listening to like bands like the Wipers, Nirvana, Bikini Kill. And I was just like, I've never heard anything like this. And it had this profound effect on me that was really empowering. And then there's this sort of conflict though, because I fell in love with it immediately. It was also kind of a gateway into poetry as well, because some of those bands in the late 90s, like when I was finally able to start going to shows, I'd hear them do these incredible, like these powerful spoken word things before songs. And I'd never seen anything like that. So in a way, it also was a gateway into poetry and writing. And I started seeking out shows and sort of seeking out that community, and then really kind of came into this like deep self-conflict, like where I was like, wait a minute. I started to notice as I got older, I was like, everyone in this room is white. and like, look around being like, where are the other Native folks? And like, so then, and feeling like this sort of intersection of my identity being like, it felt really lonely in the punk community for a while, where I was like, yeah, we're singing about these issues and, you know, down with capitalism. And I feel like the punk scene is changing now. The punk scene is doing good work. We have way more like, you know, Indigenous, like, and Native punk and goth bands, which I love to see. But when I was a little teenager, it was just like a white boy party. And so I started to kind of question, what am I doing in this room? Why am I here? And then realizing, I think also going to the Institute of American Indian Arts and meeting Native punks and like artists and people who are doing these radical things that I was drawn to in the beginning when I first fell in love with punk, but it also spoke to me and there was space for my Coast Salish identity as well. And so I think that finding that balance has been so important to me. And I'm sorry, I'm so rambly, but
take your time.
A couple years ago, many years ago, what is time? Colonial construct. When Red Paint first came out, I had the opportunity to do this really cool conversation with a Salish writer, Emma Noyes, who wrote this really cool zine that then turned into a book called Baby Speak Salish. And I thought she was the coolest. Like, we had just met and they were like, okay, she's gonna interview you. And I'm like, she's so rad. And her first question was, what does punk have anything to do with like your grandmother and where you come from and your culture? And it was like on the spot, kind of like, it was another mind-blowing moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of that. But then when I did, I think about the things that attracted me to punk, like fighting against oppressors, fighting against erasure, being loud and angry and, you know, demanding change and demanding justice, like through this artistic form. I thought of what my great grandmother did with our language revitalization. She literally committed her life to saving our language from erasure. That is so punk. So if that answers your question.
Oh, definitely. Yes, thank you. The third question, next question I wanted to ask was, do you have rituals or ceremonies to get yourself in your writing or creative process?
I do. I love this question too, because I think even recently a student and I were in conversation and they were like, you always write by water. You have to go to water. Like, and I was like, do I? Oh, like the past few times that I'm like, oh, I really got to hunker down and get like a week's worth of writing done. I went out to La Push and stayed in a tiny cabin by myself for a week, just trying to like hammer it out. And then a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity, and it was such a privilege, and I'm so stoked that they had me out, the Sitka Center for Arts and Ecology down on the Oregon coast. And I was like, cool, I'm going to go, again, be in a cabin on the coast by myself writing. And my student pointed out like, oh, so you write by water. And I think that is like when I'm that's my biggest ritual. If I'm feeling like I need to really connect with myself and my story, I go to water. So that's my ritual.
That's beautiful. Thank you. How much does the support or involvement of your peers and colleagues in Indigenous literature and writing impact your work as a writer?
Oh, without it, I think this even goes back to even during my undergrad as a student, before I even began to write professionally, this goes back to that feeling of being in the room with other folks that get it, and that it not only get it, but also inspire you, challenge you. Like, I think of our like Native lit community when I am reading like No'u Revila, Tay Tibble, Tommy Pico, Tommy Orange, like I'm just going to list off everybody that I love. When I read their work and engage with it, I feel at home, and it also makes me feel like, okay, we can do this. So I feel like that has the biggest impact on feeling like finding the inspiration to keep going, because it is hard being a writer. Like it sucks sometimes. I didn't mean to say that. Sorry. It's challenging. And so I think we need that support and that inspiration. When I get to sit down in a room with a few of my like Native artists or writer friends, I feel like rejuvenated. I'm like, okay, like hearing what their projects are, whether it's a film or a book of poetry, engaging in that sort of rekindles like when I'm feeling really down or feeling like, what is the point? And then I read my beautiful friends' work or see their beautiful art. And I'm like, that is the point.
Thank you. Yeah, especially I wanted to ask that question because a lot of your advocacy work and accountability work that you weave within your own writing, I could see how having that safer space within the community is very, very important. So thank you. I wanted to also ask, do you think there is an additional responsibility or expectation that you carry as a Native writer?
Ooh. This one's a doozy. Yes. This is a two-part because I'm like, from a cultural standpoint, absolutely. Like when I first wrote Red Paint, a draft of it, I literally had to give it to my family. I was working with an editor and I said, wait, before you read this, before anybody reads this, I have to give it to my family and my community because I want to make sure I'm writing about this in a respectful way. And I think like younger generations, like, and at the time, me being like, oh, there is a responsibility to respect our culture and make sure we are acting accordingly. And there was a few things when my mom first got the draft, she was like, Xing things out, absolutely not, can't talk about that, nope, not this. And like I was like, I needed to learn that, and so that was my responsibility. And not that everybody is going to like be a fan of what I did or be like, oh, she did that great. Like, of course we're not going to please everybody, but with my direct community I had to check in, and my mom schooled me and was like, nope, you can't do that. And then it was really interesting because meanwhile my editor was like, you're really vague here, and I was like, yeah, that's on purpose. And then he'd be like, I think we need to break this down and like have you explain it to a non-native audience. And at one point I was like, do you want me to get Jill LaPointe on the phone and she can explain this to you? My mom, you know? So I really had to advocate for myself in that and be like, I'm choosing to do this in a respectful way. Hope that answered your question.
Definitely. Thank you. Another question is, what would be a great way for you to suggest to someone that wants to write but has imposter syndrome, and how they can begin getting themselves confident in writing? Especially, I would also say, additionally, in context of memoirs or writing about themselves as well.
Also, not gonna lie, people are surprised by this, but I'm like, I still struggle with imposter syndrome. And some of my favorite artists, whether they're jewelry designers or musicians, filmmakers, some of my favorite artists also admit to like still struggling with that. And it is something that, like, even when I do a reading or anything, I'm constantly like, wait, what am I doing? Why am I here? Why have they invited me to the table? So it's kind of constantly there. And I think that my advice to that, as someone who deeply still actively struggles with it, is to not let it get in your way. Like, even if you just kind of have to like power through it, which I don't know. I'm like, this is a hard question for me. But also one thing that does help is having like your hype people, having close artists that like inspire you and hear your work and hype you up and say, like, I have friends like that. Friends that are like, what are you talking about? Stop whining. You can do this. You're a badass. Like, having that community like really helps, because sometimes when we're moving through, especially as Indigenous like writers or artists, moving through like non-native spaces, white spaces, there is this feeling of you've been invited here, but you don't really get to hang out and stay here. And so surrounding yourself with people that remind you that you deserve a space in the room has been massively helpful to me. I hope that.
Yes, thank you. And I really appreciate the honesty in that as well, too. What is your advice to our students in the audience and online about being a writer?
Oh, it's a big one.
Just, you know.
Yeah, it's just I'm having a crisis of identity on stage right now. I'm like, whoa. I guess I can speak for like what helped me get through it because I shared that story of like, I'm just going to take some art classes in college. And then writing became the thing, and writing pulled me in. And I was not expecting that. I knew I always loved storytelling, but I also wanted to like be a painter, and I wanted to write stories about mermaids and like werewolves. I'm not kidding. And then nonfiction and poetry just somehow got in me and like pulled me over to that side. And that was really intimidating. And that was really overwhelming. And I think that I'm thinking of younger Sasha then. What really helped me through that is reading, like reading, like truly helped me. Like I would read a book and it'd be so good that I'd want to throw it across my floor and be like, oh my God, that was so good. Like finding things like that that have like such a powerful effect on you kept me going. And like, even though the writing was intimidating, especially when we're writing about ourselves, finding memoirs like that really inspired me and made me go, wait a minute, they're writing about this. Like, that's what I loved. Like Melissa Febos, Deborah Miranda, who wrote Bad Indians. Melissa Febos wrote Whipsmart and Girlhood. And finding those like kindred spirit writers and let them like kind of guide you, like read as much as you can and read things that are so good you want to throw them across the room and cry, but in a good way. Because that really lit like the fire in me. And like when I was feeling lost or having writer's block or being like, I can't do this, it sort of rekindled that. So finding authors, books, poets that you really, really love and make you go, wow, is like the best advice I can give you.
Thank you. I love that, in a good way. Throw it in a good way.
I would. I'm so dramatic. I'd be like, this is
it.
the best thing I've ever read.
And if you do decide to do some sci-fi, I'm definitely going to be in line for that.
Good. Thank you. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. We hype each other up. Like, Thank you. I do want to do sci-fi and fantasy.
Yes, there's always time. Time is a social construct, so thank you. And because you answered some of that the next question, I'll skip that one and go to the ninth question. So who are some contemporary writers, or what contemporary books are you currently engaging with?
Love this because it's something I do at every reading where I literally bring them. I'm like such a nerd. No Uravila's Ask the Brindled, Tay Tibble's Pocahontas, also Juliana Gunn's No Country for Eight-Spotted Butterfly is a beautiful, he's a queer Chamorro poet and activist and like environmental and human rights lawyer. He's kind of a superhero. Wow. His book is beautiful. I think I reread Deborah Miranda's Bad Indians like once a year. I love her lyric form approach to memoir. It's a really powerful book. I also really love Kinsell Drake, her new collection of poetry. Tommy Pico's Nature Poem is one of my favorite books. And speaking of like horror and like sci-fi or fantasy, I just read Stephen Graham Jones' Buffalo Hunter, which was so good. I could go on. I feel like this is when you're at a party and someone's like, what's your favorite album? And I'm like, how long do you have? But those are off the top of my head, some of my favorites.
Thank you. The floor is yours. So if you want to keep going, you're more than welcome to. How do you unblock writer's block or handle moments when you don't feel creative or inspired?
I love this question because oftentimes, if I'm teaching memoir or intro to creative nonfiction, I kind of roast myself in a good way because, as I did a little earlier, I think it's really important to talk about our failures. So one thing I'll do when students are struggling through, it's hard to write about ourselves. People think we're just like, also Melissa Febos's essay in praise of navel gazing is one of the best essays I've ever read about this. But I feel like people are like, oh, you're just writing about yourself. Like, that's fun. It's like, no, it's not. Have you ever tried? It's actually one of the most terrifying things like you'll ever do. But if you do, it's powerful and important. We need your stories. But I usually give this presentation. I talk about her essay in praise of navel gazing. I also talk about Little Boats writing that first failed memoir and learning from that mistake. And one of the biggest important things like that I really focus on and try to tell my students is when you're struggling and you just feel like you're kind of bashing yourself against closed gates to take a break and know when to walk away. Because after Little Boats like failed, I took a huge break. Especially writing about ourselves is deeply emotional. We're like mucking around in oftentimes some really hard memories, some really hard experiences, and trying to like wrestle them into art, which is no easy task. And so when it gets too hard, my biggest advice is to take a break. I took a year break. You don't have to take a year break, but to walk away from it for however long you need. I took a year break and just waited tables and joined a terrible punk band and like went on tour and was like, I'm taking a break from reading or writing. And I needed that to have that distance from it, and to eventually, that led me on a path of like deep reflection, healing, and that's what led me to red paint. So I feel like breaks are very important. We can't just like force it. And I think there's this expectation like, oh, you've got to crank it out. You got to grind. You got to write it. No, also listen to your spirit and yourself and be like, oh, I need a break. And then it will come to you when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The last question I'll ask is, how do you think urban Native students, especially since you share about a lot of between your relationships, especially living away from the city and coming into the city, but also knowing now a lot of urban Native communities and urban Native students, how do you think urban Native students can tap into their ancestral knowledge in creating art?
I love that too, because I also now live in Tacoma, right? And my niece and nephew are growing up in an urban like environment, and I think my advice to them and to folks in urban communities would be to seek out art and books and stories. Like, I think I touched on this earlier, but it is such a privilege to remain connected to our cultures when there's been such an like active force trying to remove us from it. So when we're able to engage with it, whether it's storytelling or going to canoe journey or going to different like tribal events, seeking those out. And then also, like, if you don't even have the privilege to do that, like finding like films, books, collections of poetry, and letting that kind of be a guide and an inspiration and a way to feel connected. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wanted to take this time to just share with you all. Shortly after this, we'll be having lunch provided. But I really wanted to just also take one last time to thank you and give a round of applause again for Sasha LaPointe. Thank you. Thank you very much. I also wanted to share with you really quickly that we put together, our tribal liaison and I, we put together a thank you bag, and then we also have a medicine bag for you as well too. But thank you. Thank you very much. And so if you all are interested in having a book signed, we're going to be doing that downstairs as well. Following this, we are also going to be, as shared earlier, downstairs, we're going to be serving food. So here is our other gift that we have. This is if you want to share a bit more. Here, I'll hold that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Sasha. And just some medicines from our TEK providers here we put together. So I wanted to honor you in a good way. And I want to thank you all that came in person, and for all of you that are online to engage in this to kick off our Native Heritage Month here for Seattle Colleges. And it's really an honor to have Sasha here and doing this work. And so, like many Coast Salish people, we've all been touched by Tuxtlebu, your namesake, in doing this work. And her and my father were good friends at University of Washington for all those years doing that work. And so for us and the next couple generations to continue it on. So, and then we're just going to share this honor song for Sasha, because we wanted to at least close out in a good way for this work that she's doing. And this song comes from a late Chief Frank Nelson, who Patricia and I both had relationships with, and really was a pivotal figure in that Coast Salish revitalization of our ocean-going canoe societies. And so, so we want to share this as we close out, and then we want to invite everybody over, come down for lunch and get your book signed.
Oh